All right, I now welcome on that he is the Associate Professor of Educational Leadership at Ball State University, or probably as he is best known, the originator of basketball's Elam ending. Dr. Nick Elam, welcome to the pod.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
I want to cover all things Elam ending, but today's talk I want to start, of course, with just the basics. So, for those listeners that maybe don't know, can you just take them through what exactly the Elam ending is and how this all originated?
Sure. So the Elam inning in a nutshell is a format where you would play most of the game with a game clock and you play the last part of the game without a game clock. And the idea is not to change basketball, really, it's to do the opposite, to preserve a more natural and exciting style of play through the end of every game. And so this format has been adopted by TBT, the basketball tournament. But then it's grown to countless grassroots leagues and events throughout the United States and abroad. It's also been implemented at the NBA All Star Game, the NBA G League, the NBA Summer League, and the Women's College All Star Game. And it's exciting to ponder where it might appear next.
Yeah, for sure. Take me back to the moment that you realized traditional basketball endings were kind of problematic. I think I've done some research. I believe it was March 10th, 2007 was the exact date. But take me back to that day and when you realized something was wrong and it needed to change.
Well, I've been a lifelong basketball fan. So from the age of 5, I've been watching basketball. And so it probably wasn't too long after that that I realized that there was a problem, as you said, with the time format. And really, it's a fundamental flaw where you get to a stage in the game where the trailing team's only recourse is to overtly and deliberately break the rules of the sport by committing a foul. And that type of glaring flaw would be worth addressing in a video game, a card game, a board game, and certainly a major sport. And yet it was just an ingrained part of basketball and an accepted part of basketball. Um, so I've been aware of this problem for a long, long time. But the significance of March 10th, 2007 is when the light bulb came on where I actually thought I had a solution in mind for this problem. And that was this concept that has since become known as the Elam ending. Now, even at the time, I thought I was even skeptical of this concept that I thought of getting rid of the clock at the last part of the game. I thought there must be some flaw that I was overlooking in that. So I really started to explore this concept and scrutinize it from every angle I could, try to poke holes in it every way I could. But as the weeks and the months went on in 2007, I really started to believe that the idea had merit. I believed that the idea was necessary, that it was sound, that it had the potential to be very cool. And then the really tough part started of trying to convince others in the basketball world that the idea had merit too.
Yeah, I wanted to take for you to kind of take me through that process because you come up with that idea in your living room essentially, and then how do you go about just being like, hi NBA, hi college basketball, hi TBT? Like, you don't know who I am, but I have this idea that could revolutionary change the game of basketball. And I think it's such an interesting thing because like the game of basketball doesn't have a lot of change in it, all the way back from, when Dr. James Naismith came up with it. So how exactly do you go about that process?
Well, whatever I did, I don't know if it was the best way to go about it because it took 10 years to finally convince TBT to implement the idea. So, but what I tried was not so far different from what you said. I had to, if I was even lucky enough to find contact information for people, um, reach out and acknowledge that I am not an insider in the basketball community. However, I'm a knowledgeable and passionate fan. So I had to convey a tone that I am knowledgeable but not a know-it-all. I had to keep in mind that I am communicating with people whose livelihoods are made in the sport of basketball, and so I always needed to be, even though I much of my argument is pointing out these different flaws and negative consequences of the timed format. I had to do it in a way that wasn't going to alienate them or turn them off, and wasn't going to start to make it seem like I didn't even like basketball myself. I had to keep that message clear that I really do love basketball, and I think this is a way to make a great sport even greater. So, and I've tried lots of different ways to frame my argument, lots of different ways to present it, from the most quick and succinct to really drawn out and in depth, from ordering and layering things in different ways of uh, and visually displaying them. Ultimately, the order that ultimately clicked and worked for TBT was um, laying out the idea first, and then going back and talking about, well, what is the need, why is it needed, and having numbers to back it up, and then what are some of the residual effects of this, what it might look like, sound like, things like that. So and to have numbers, that was something that when I started out, I would just do this kind of small sample of NCAA tournament games, of what, taking a snapshot of what's going on in the sport. But as you know, again, as the years went on, and I just wasn't making progress and making convincing argument, then I just started. In 2014, I started to go all in on um, this research effort, which over the course of 4 years meant watching the ends of about 2,900 basketball games.
Wow.
And again, the types of data that I'm collecting are things that you can't really extract from a box score or play by play summary. So I had to watch the footage of the games. I had to watch the recordings of the games and tally these different things that I was looking for. So um, there was certainly a huge time investment in that. But again, I think that having all that robust data might have been what put it over the edge, and to finally make a convincing argument.
Yeah, I take that data and I read it in one of the articles that you had emailed the creator of TBT, so I think it's John Mugar, I didn't know how to pronounce his last name, a 67 slide PowerPoint detailing the Elam ending. And then did that essentially just change everything? Is that filled with data, filled with all the idea? And then he was like, wait, this is something I really want to go forward with.
Yeah, and all that data and that type of argument, again, John Mugar wasn't the first person to receive that. I sent that out many times to many people over the years, but he was the first to really take it seriously and consider it. And this was, um, excuse me, this was I think around August of 2016. So they had just finished their 2016 event when I connected with him, and they had, for TBT, it's an event that's confined to just a few weeks in the summer, so he had a lot of time to really give this good consideration. He wasn't necessarily in a time crunch to do it. So as the months went on, in the latter part of 2016, early part of 2017, we stayed in touch, and it was around March of 2017 that he and TBT decided that they were going to go forward with this concept. And they were going to do it on an experimental basis in 2017. They just did it for an extra preliminary round, or a play-in round. Um, and it wasn't until about May of 2018, I think. So I was left in suspense for a long time, but finally in May of 2018,
Interesting, yeah.
they decided they were going to go all in. And every game since then, they've used the Elam ending.
Wow, that's crazy. I feel like it's just a real testament to your perseverance. Like it was 2007 when you came up with the idea. It's 2018ish when you finally see it. Like what kind of resistance are you facing throughout this entire time? Like are you the most comfortable person ever to hearing no? Like how exactly
Well,
does that go?
for much of this journey, I was working full time as a school principal, and so if there's one thing that a school principal knows, it's how to take criticism graciously. So I never, I was never bothered by the criticism. I never took it personally. In fact, I saw it as an opportunity, possibly to refine the idea and make it better. And actually, I wish some of the criticism was more constructive that I could have used. So I mean, over those years, reaching out to who knows how many hundreds and hundreds of people that I reached out to, probably into the thousands, but uh, I would probably get a response of any kind from about 5% of them. Um, a lot of them were just kind of politely declining or politely saying, what they didn't see it as a great fit. Um, or they would raise arguments that I had already, kind of refuted through my research that weren't really valid. But so there wasn't as much constructive criticism that I'd hoped for. And again, it was one of those things. It's like if someone had been able to point out a flaw in the idea, for some reason why it wouldn't work, then I would have done my own follow up. But if it found to be valid and that the idea wasn't as sound as I thought it would be, then I would have moved on to something else. But no one was really able to tell me why it wouldn't work. It was just more of it wasn't. It was more of a matter of taste that they didn't like the idea. And so the fact that there wasn't that ultimate flaw, I saw it. There wasn't really the ultimate dead end either in this journey in this project. And so I always felt like, and so that's part of what kept me going. And so it was like, well, if these people say they really don't like this idea, but they're not able to tell me a valid reason why, surely they would if they could, because I think they wanted, you know, they didn't love the idea. But
Yeah.
I always felt like I was just one day away from a big breakthrough. I didn't know it was going to be 10 years worth of one days, but um, I really I really felt like I was always on the doorstep of some big breakthrough for this idea.
That's awesome. So you finally see it in the TBT at that point, the 10 plus years later. Was seeing this ending coming to life in the competitive basketball tournament like that on national TV, has that been like your biggest, pinch me moment, or is there something else that stands out even more?
Yeah, I think finally seeing it come to life in 2017 and in Philadelphia at these preliminary rounds of TBT, and at that time those particular games were only on streaming, what used to be called ESPN3. It's now ESPN Plus. Um,
Yep.
this was such a huge weekend. I mean, it was weird because I had played out these games in my mind and on paper so many times that when I was finally seeing it actually on the court in front of me, I had to kind of keep reminding myself that, oh, this is actually different from, this is actually the real game. Like, because again, like I'd visualized this so much that uh, it it felt weird that other people were only seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
So, because I felt like I was watching this game for the thousandth time, and um, but it didn't take long to know that the concept was going to live on beyond that first day, because they packed, I think it was 7 games right back to back on that first Saturday. And um, by the first game or two were just very sound. I mean, there wasn't anything spectacular necessarily, which is fine. But here we had games that had a margin of victory of around 7 or 8 points that were able to have a smooth finish to them. They didn't devolve into this foul fest, um, and that's something that we never see in games that have a 7 or 8 point margin of victory under the time format. By the fourth game, we had our first kind of sudden death finish and next basket wins kind of situation. And Josh Selby made a mid-range jumper that was contested. That was a fine shot, tough shot, and it sparked this celebration where his team ran out from the bench. He ripped off his jersey in excitement. Like the whole team was going crazy, and it was affirming to me because it helped um, just address one of the concerns that I had heard from people all along, which was skepticism that the Elam ending could provide finishes and celebrations that look and sound and feel like a buzzer beater. And here we had some evidence that it could in just its fourth game. In the fifth game of the day, and fifth game of the existence of the Elam ending, we had a Rutgers alumni team that was down by 13 points at the start of the Elam ending, go on a 14-0 run to take the lead. And the game was neck and neck
Oh
from
wow.
there. But um, and they did it just through playing really tough, uh, good basketball, getting a good look on offense, playing really tough defense without fouling on defense. And so that was also something that I thought would happen on paper. is that we'd see more likelihood of comebacks, and doing so in a way that's more satisfying. And here we were seeing that in just the fifth game of the day. So um, that first day was just so thrilling and affirming in so many different ways. And I didn't know where or how or when the Elam inning was going to continue past that first weekend. I just knew that the project still had life. This was not going to be the end of the project there on that day.
That has to be such a cool feeling. I want to take you back just a little bit to what you just said of the just you were worried that potentially taking away a buzzer beater or taking away that potential to have the buzzer beater would kind of take away people's attention. I was wondering if it was actually a little bit of the opposite that you found. So I was kind of thinking like I think the idea of you can get to an end of a game and say, I can guarantee you that this game will end in a game winning shot. Like, I think that how important do you think that is in today's society when there's so many competing entities trying to vie for your attention? So like, and with the clock at the end of the game, like often you'll run into issues where it's like, ah, they're fouling. Oh, they're at the monitor again. I'm on my phone. I'm looking at something else. I've got the other TV playing this. Like with Elam Minting, you're like, there's a game-winning shot coming up. Stay tuned.
Yeah,
How important is that?
I think the best innovations are those that are both practical and cool. And I think the first thing that I love about the Elam ending is more on the practical side. I love that um, I just love that it just naturally discourages these junky strategies, and we get a more authentic style of play through the end of the game. I think it's a better way of identifying the better team, the winning team. Other people love the cool part of it more, and one of those people is John Mugar of TBT. He loves the fact that every game ends on a make, and there's no question about it that they have leaned into that aspect in their marketing of um, just continuing to remind folks that every game ends with a make, and that's really the appeal that they see in that. So um, it
Yeah, I saw the Puma wearing
yeah,
shoe players this year got to have the bonus money
yeah,
if they hit the game-winning shot.
exactly right. Yep. So yeah, and again, it's not just guaranteeing that the game's going to end on a make, but it's also guaranteeing that the game's going to end imminently. Which again, it's one of the concerns is that I hear, is that people are concerned that there's not going to be any more overtime with the Elam ending. Well, what I would say to that is if you get rid of the possibility of overtime, it actually increases the excitement because under a timed format, as a close game comes down to the wire, there's three possibilities. My team's going to win, my team's going to lose, or the game's going to go to overtime. Well, under the Elam ending, as a close game comes down to the wire, there's only two possibilities. My team's going to win or my team's going to lose. And you get rid of that third neutral option, it actually it raises the stakes. It makes it more exciting knowing that this game's going to end any moment now, and we better hope we're on the right side of it. There's
Yeah,
no
for
there's
sure.
no there's no escape hatch of overtime.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering if you think when you get to that end of the game, would you say that the Elam ending benefits the losing or the winning team more, or do you think it's really just neutral? I've seen arguments both ways, so I'm honestly not sure.
Well, you definitely still want to be in the lead when the Elam ending starts. There's no doubt about it. And um, you know, a 5 point lead is better than having a 1 point lead. It's not as good as having a 10 point lead. Leads are good, and that's a good thing. The What the Elam ending does is it takes away some of the artificial disadvantages that the trailing team faces near the end of the game, or artificial advantages the leading team has. If you're ahead, you know, under a time format, you really don't have to earn your points anymore. You're going to get handed free points by getting these free trips to the foul line. And so not only do you already have the lead, but now you have this artificial extra advantage of just getting to score points without even running an offense. And then you think about how the clock acts as a sixth defender for the leading team, forcing trailing teams to just force up these ugly shots. Um, some of the most important shots of a game end up being almost like blooper reel material, the ugly
Yeah.
shots of the game where the five players on the court really don't have to do any defending. It's the clock doing all the defending and forcing up this terrible shot that you wouldn't see at any other time in the game. And so there's another artificial advantage. Well, what all the eliminating does is it takes away these artificial advantages and disadvantages, and now you're left with more of an authentic advantage. If you're up by 5, that's great, but you're still going to have to earn your points. You're still going to have to play defense. So it makes late comebacks more likely. There's no doubt about that, which I think is a good thing. But what's really good thing is that whether there's a comeback or not, I think the outcome of the game is more satisfying because you're seeing more authentic play.
Yep, I would agree. I've got two final questions for you, then I know you've got to run. So, um, we've seen this in the NBA All-Star Game. We've seen all this kind of stuff. Like when you Google your name now, I see a picture with you and Anthony Davis and Chris Paul. Like, who's the coolest person that you've met through all of this?
Wow, great question. Who is the coolest person that I've met through all of this? Um, Man, I have to think about that. I mean, it's hard to top Chris Paul. Um,
He seems to
so
be a
we'll
big
say
fan of yours in general, from what I've read too. So I thought
so
that
yeah,
might be
we'll
the
say he's
answer.
the leader. We'll say he's the leader in the clubhouse.
Okay,
Unless somebody else comes to mind, I'm not sure I can top Chris Paul.
all right, that's fair. Then other question I had for you, just like, where do you see the Elam ending going now? I know it was in the NBA All-Star game for a while. They took it away weirdly, but All-Star games are messed up in general anyways. So where do you see the Elam ending going, or have you identified, other sports where there are potential Elam ending inefficiencies that you want to get into? Take it wherever you would like to go.
Well, and so I'm proud of the 4-year run that the Elam Inning had at the NBA All Star Game, and I'm really not. I'm not sure I'm disappointed at all that it's not there anymore because I think in order for the Elam Inning to work, I think something has to be at stake. There has to be some stakes in the game where the NBA All Star Game they've tried to make something at stake that just hasn't really worked, and I feel like it was going to be less and less effective there in an exhibition format. But
Yep.
things where things like TBT, where teams are playing for $1 million winner take all prize, things like the NBA G League, where these are players and coaches who are trying to take the next step, you know, the biggest step in their career. Obviously, there are high stakes there. The NBA Summer League now for the first time, where these are players who are trying to prove themselves early in their career. So to me, the fact that it's growing and sustaining at those levels, I think, is even more telling. And again, the NBA doesn't just do these experiments just for the fun of it. I mean, they put in these rules because they think there's a real chance that it might be implemented at a higher level. And so, as long as it continues to work as effectively as it has at the G League, at the Summer League, then I think we absolutely could see it in some form or fashion at the NBA level, and that'll be really, really exciting.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Have you noticed potential for it to be in other sports as well, or is that, I know you're a basketball junkie. Would you say it's primarily basketball, or what have you noticed in other sports?
It is a primarily a basketball idea. I could give you the 10-minute really nerdy discussion of why, but I'll try to give the 10-second succinct version instead. Basically, if you look at all time sports, basketball is the only sport a time sport that has a scoring rate that's reliable and consistent to the point where you can realistically use points instead of a clock. All the other time sports, scoring is much more sporadic, and if you try to use points instead of a clock or goals instead of a clock, then you could have some real unintended consequences.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Dr. Nick Elam, thank you so much for being able to join this. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.